And now, the Lowe Post.
Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast. It's Tuesday. It's snowing. I already laid the track for sledding in my backyard, so I've done my dadding for the day. All-Star break is coming up. Trade deadline is over, and now it's time to really sink into the basketball. We got about 30 games left. Seedings and playoff matchups will come into formation soon. Get a little clarity. Big questions are going to be answered. The teams are now essentially fully formed. It's time to focus on the hoops. If you want to learn about basketball, this is one of the guys to go to. One half of the Dunker Spot podcast. A regular guest on JJ Redick's Old Man in the Three. Steve Jones Jr. How are you, sir?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. I will not disclose that it's a sunny day in Texas, but salute on the sledding.
Sledding is a good time. I'm not a ski guy. I'm a sled guy. So I said I want to go, like, let's zoom way out. Trade deadline's over. The minutia, we've dug through it already. Now it's time to look forward, see how the new pieces fit, see what storylines develop. And I said, I want you to prepare your 4 or 5 biggest questions for the rest of the NBA season going into the playoffs. And I did mine too. I am going to be a selfish host and start off because I want to get your take on my number one biggest question for the rest of the season. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I think this is the biggest question in the entire NBA for the next 30 games. How good exactly are the Milwaukee Bucks? What is this team, which is ninth in net rating, after shellacking the Denver Nuggets at home last night? We're taping this Tuesday afternoon. They play again tonight against the Heat. The Nuggets, by the way, down to 10th in net rating. We'll talk a little bit about them and if you're a little worried about them at all. But the Bucks are 35-19, third in the East. With Joel Embiid's injury and all the health issues in New York, there's a window for them to get up to 2. Cleveland's making it an uphill battle. We're going to talk about the Cavs with Chris Fedor soon. I think you can agree, Steve, it's been a little raggedy for the Milwaukee Bucks in the Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo era. We've had some cranky press conferences, a coach fired, a new coach that got off to a 1-4 start after being an ESPN announcer for a hot second. The Dame Giannis chemistry hasn't come along as quickly as we thought. The defense has been somewhere between a disaster and a tire fire, depending on where you rank those two natural or whatever occurrences. But here we are. They are 35-19. They are something like plus 15 per 100 possessions with their 4 best players on the floor. Dame, Giannis, Middleton, Lopez. That's the skeleton of something. Amid all the chaos and all the whatever, that stuff is over. Now it's time to coalesce into a team that can we think they can win the title. What are you watching for from the Bucks? They just acquired Pat Beverly. Where are you on this team?
With me on the Bucks, I have firmly been in. They're good. Giannis is very good. Dame is very good. Can they start to find the little things defensively? Can we clean up the transition defense in the half court? Can we keep the ball in front? Can we show early help? That's where I think the Patrick Beverly signing helps. That's where I think adding Doc Rivers helps. Because the one thing I've noticed, way more decisive defensively during this stretch. Even if the results have been uneven, you've seen more of we're going to double against Dallas and we're going to rotate behind that. We're going to switch and we're going to show help. We're going to be able to keep things in front. Even in that Denver game, they ended up winning. Their mindset at first was we're switching against Jokic, which sounded and looked great until you realized, oh, that's Malik Beasley by himself guarding Nikola Jokic. We can't do that anymore. Let's stop doing that. And so I think having that mindset defensively ultimately will help them. And the offense has not really been the issue. I think the big key for me has been Giannis has looked very locked in during this stretch, post coaching move. I think you've seen him return to form with his weak side rotations and his help defense. I think that's so important for Milwaukee. And being able to craft these lineups where Giannis is actually allowed to roam a little bit more as opposed to being in the action is key. For me, it's just, I think Milwaukee can clean it up. Do they have enough to go through the playoffs with this version of their team? Do they have enough defense to give their offense wiggle room? I think that's the landing spot they have to get to.
You know, when they traded Dame for Drew, which despite all the things that have happened since, is still a trade I think I would make if I were them, even though you had no control over where Drew Holiday ended up and he ended up going to the worst possible place for the Milwaukee Bucks. I still think the prior version of this team had run its course and needed something to bring in some oxygen on offense and some clarity on offense. And Dame has brought oxygen, not as much clarity as I had thought would happen, just in terms of like, okay, here's a ready-made best two-man game in the league. It hasn't quite been that. You see glimpses of it, but it's 10, 11, 12 pick and rolls a game, not 30. And there's a million reasons for that we can get into if you want. But I was a little, I thought just Giannis and Brook would be enough for this team to be 12th in defense, 14th in defense. Having two guys who have been annual first team, second team, all defense conversation kind of guys would be enough. And it hasn't been. The perimeter defense hasn't been good enough. The transition defense has been horrible. Doc has already gotten that in order. I think you see the transition defense has gotten a lot better. And, you know, I don't know, man. As long as they have those two dudes and as long as they have Giannis and a good supporting cast and, you know, Chris Middleton, his minutes have been ramping up. He didn't play last night against Denver. Crowder starting to look a little Crowdery. I like the Pat Bev addition. We haven't seen a lot of him next to Lillard, really, if at all, maybe a couple minutes, and that's it so far. I'm interested to see if he can kind of butt his way into the closing lineup in some scenarios. You know, Connaughton hasn't really been great. He's just been okay. Portis has been pretty good. AJ Green, Derry Bird, as Marcus Johnson calls him, has been giving him good minutes off the bench. The other young guys don't play. I don't know. It's just been such a strange season, and yet I still think this team can win the title. I'm not going to pick them, but I think they can. But I think in these next 20 games, let's say, they've got to give me 3 weeks where they just look consistently really good, where there isn't a horrible loss, where there isn't like we just let go of the rope on defense, where there isn't a cranky press conference. Just give me like 3 weeks of, hey, we're just a really good team trending the right way. That's what I want to see.
I see. Can I ask one question on Dame and Giannis and pick and roll?
Absolutely.
Where are you at with that? Because are we at the they need to run it more stage or the, hey, what's going on when these two are in action together stage? Because it feels like the timing is off sometimes, where Giannis is looking to screen, Dame's looking to snake. Now Giannis rolls into Dame and those kind of things happen.
Collisions, the pick and roll collision.
Mm-hmm.
I still am on the, I think they should run it more. I think they should run the inverted version of it more, which is to say more than never. They just don't ever run it. And I get all the reasons why they're not running them more. Number one, I don't think Giannis wants to set 30 and 35 ball screens a game. Maybe that changes in the conference finals or the finals if they get there. And it's just like, we got to all do whatever it takes to win. And I have Middleton over here and I'll set 15 for him because I really trust him as a pick and roll ball handler. We've got a ton of chemistry. He throws me lobs. I dunk him. It's great. And I think they realized right away when we do run this 2-man game, they're going to blitz Dame and 4 dudes are going to be waiting for Giannis in the paint before he even catches the ball. And you're just going to have to kick it out a lot of the time to Brook and Crowder and Beasley and Middleton. And those are all good options. Like I think those are mostly good shots. If I can get a contested Jay Crowder above the break 3 as a defense, that's good for me. A contested Brook Lopez above the break 3, I can live with that of all the options. The other ones are pretty dangerous shots. I just think I just wonder, like, those are 2 superstar players, 2 guys who have been first, second team all NBA level players. They want to finish possessions and start possessions. And so I wonder if that becomes an irritant for them. Like, I mean, I got to kick it out again. And I don't know. But I do think it needs to be run more. What do you think? Answer your own question.
I think I'm at the point where I like the fact that Milwaukee has a base and they don't have to rely on that to open things up for them offensively. I think there's value in that and being able to generate quality shots for Beasley, for Brook Lopez. I think that's a plus. I do wonder if they can now tap into it come playoff time or in the build up to the playoffs to where now it's not just we're good in the fourth quarters. You also have to deal with this and we can guarantee ourselves a good shot. Like, is that the magic behind it? I just kind of want to see more of the chemistry come between it. And I'd like more off ball screens between them. Get back to the elbow action. Have Dame screen for Giannis that way. Put pressure on teams that way. I just think it's such an easy way to open things up.
Honestly, they did that in the preseason a few times, and I remember highlighting it on video like, oh my God, a Dame back screen for Giannis at the elbow, got an alley-oop or got a Dame a three because everybody went with Giannis. And they just haven't done that. And it's one of those things, as someone who's never played or coached in the league, I'm sure there are reasons for that. It's not like the coaches are dumb and don't realize those things are good. They all know those things are good and they don't happen. So there must be a reason for it. But man, I think it's not that we've all missed the forest for the trees, because the trees have been a mess and they've been falling all over the place and making loud noises and they've been worth paying attention to. I just think there is a really great team in here somewhere, and it's time to see it now. Like, the drama's over. The roster is what it is. You got one semi-helpful player, which is really all you could get with what you had. And it's time to put some good wins together. And last night against Denver, I know no KCP. Jamal Murray left after 18 minutes. They were already rolling Denver when those guys were in the game. That was a good win. And they rolled Boston a few weeks ago by 30-something at home. You know, Mazzulla pulled the starters after halftime. Give me some more of that, because this team could get scary if it starts to click. Give me your first big question.
Who on earth wins the Western Conference?
Well, that's a good, timely question. Expound upon the question for me.
The reason why I put that down, so I looked, and as of right now, all of the top 10 in the West have either won 6 of their last 10 games or 7 of their last 10 games. And you have this pack up front of the top 4 where a game and a half separates Denver from Minnesota. And then you have a game that separates New Orleans at 5 from Dallas at 8. And my mind goes to home court advantage and how important that is. But the all top 4 of the West seeds have won 75% or better of their home games. And I'm trying to balance, what do I do with a Minnesota team that has Rudy Gobert playing at this level defensively, looking better in space, Anthony Edwards developing the playmaking, Cat hitting threes, cutting on the perimeter, punishing teams when they want to switch, but also being concerned about them facing switches. And then there's OKC with their style of play and their drives, their guard-to-guard screens, and Shea driving all over the place. But is their defense and shooting going to hold up? And then there's Denver, who's Denver, and Nikola Jokic, and the defensive versatility that they've found that I don't think gets highlighted enough. And the fact that when it's winning time, hey, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, you guys 3-run action. We're going to put pressure on teams. And then the Clippers that have been incredible. Is this just Denver's conference? Are they just lying in wait right now?
So this is a very timely question, because Denver has just kind of been for the last 3 to 4, ever since that Boston win, which was a landmark win, and they did beat the Bucks in Denver in Doc Rivers' debut. They've been a little up and down. They're 10th in net rating in the NBA, 10th. Like, that's like, ooh, that's seems low. Now, their starters have about the same net rating as they did last year, plus 12. Murray, Jokic, same net rating as last year, plus 12. Jokic's net rating is down. It's only plus 9. That's a little, their bench, we know, has been a little shaky. And also last night, one of the statement wins of the season, Minnesota, who hasn't been up and down, but it seems like every loss is kind of like a crunch time meltdown again, like red flag kind of loss. Went into LA with the number 1 seed in the West on the line and just romped the Clippers in the second half, and romped them in a way that felt like proof of concept for this team in particular. It felt like an exorcism of all the demons for Rudy Gobert, because the Timberwolves are gigantic and the Clippers went small, 5 out, no center. And we've seen the Clippers go small, 5 out, no center against Rudy Gobert. And we've seen that essentially end a team in Utah and end Rudy Gobert's reputation for a prolonged period of time. And the Wolves are like, hey, that's cool. We're just going to be big and get every offensive rebound. And Rudy Gobert is going to dunk in Kawhi Leonard's face in the second half of the game. And we're going to bully your asses out of the gym. One of the most impressive wins of the season for any team in the whole NBA. And the Wolves are now first. The Nuggets are fourth. And you tiered it the right way. We got the top 4. And one of my big questions is, are we at all worried about Denver / how important is home court advantage? Because I think this is one of the biggest storylines in the West the rest of the way. That number 1 seed was very important for the Nuggets last year. They are the best home team in the NBA. I don't think they're taking it for granted, but I also don't think they've been in fifth gear for most of the season. I think they've been in like second or third gear. Then you have 4 teams for the last 2 spots in the guaranteed playoff bracket. New Orleans, which is like good luck figuring out whatever the hell they are. Phoenix, okay, can you show us now? Sacramento did nothing at the trade deadline. I was actually fine with that. I'm actually relieved that Sacramento did nothing at the trade deadline. I know their fans are furious. I would love them to name me the move that they wanted to make. Dallas, who totally remade their roster and is on a 5-game winning streak. 2 of those teams are going to be in the play-in, and 2 of them are likely going to be in the playoffs, unless the next tier of teams, the Warriors and the Lakers, have found something in the last couple, particularly the Warriors have won 5 in a row. The Lakers are starting to play better. They're creeping up. And then Utah and Houston below them have both fallen off. Pretty likely, I think we have our top 10 in the West, but let's start at the top. And the who's going to win the West question and the home court advantage question. I'm going to start with the Nuggets. Are you at all worried about the Nuggets, who have fallen to 4th in the standings, 10th in net rating? And I was just having a conversation about this with an executive on another team yesterday. He said, I just think they just lost too much from last year's team. They lost too much from last year. I was like, what did they lose? They lost Bruce Brown. Like, I know they lost Jeff Green, but like functionally they lost Bruce Brown, who by the way, kind of hasn't done much this year away from the Jokic nirvana. And I understand, like, he was huge for them last year, huge. But I always just felt like Peyton Watson's starting to play better and make shots, and I have faith in Christian Brown. Reggie Jackson's been good off the bench. Like, I just felt like they had enough, and yet, absent a couple of big sort of statement wins, like in Boston, that was a big win. Are you worried at all?
I'm not worried about them in the playoffs. One, because I don't know which team out west truly has an answer for Nikola Jokic. I think that changes the math. I think Jamal Murray being able to be so good in so many different ways also helps. I also think when they get to the point of the playoffs, and we've seen it mixed in against some of these contenders, a couple of the highlight wins you mentioned, Aaron Gordon just becomes the backup 5. Yes. And now we're just mixing and matching and able to kind of hurt you that way and either keep it even or win those minutes. And now Jokic comes back. So I'm not traditionally worried. And I honestly feel better about their defense this year than I did last year, as far as being able to mix in, hey, Nikola Jokic, you can mix in your drop. You don't have to be at the level every time. You might switch every now and then. We'll show help, but you might switch. You guard a non-shooter and you roam. Being able to just throw
That was the biggest thing they did in the regular season last year, was somehow convince Jokic, hey, this whole like you're up at the level of the screen every single time. I know you like it, and sometimes it works, and your hands are unbelievable, and you get steals and deflections. Like, we got to do some other stuff because we can't win 4 straight playoff series like this. And they convinced him. And if you look back at that first round series against Minnesota, he dropped a lot in that series. And I liked when they put him on the diversity is like, it's been an underplayed storyline of the Nuggets because it's boring and wonky and X's and O's. It's a big deal that they did what you explained.
And that's where I kind of think that they still have a path towards that. Someone has to beat them. You have to go beat Denver. So I'm not as concerned in a playoff context. I guess for me, it's how bad do they need the 1 seed to make this work is more where I'm at.
Well, look, I mean, it also depends like where you end up. If you're not the 1 seed, are you 2? Are you 4? If you're 4, are you going to have to face the fully souped up Phoenix Suns in the first round? Because that seems crappy. Like, I know Denver beat them last year, but if I can just not play Durant and Booker in a playoff series, like I would love to just avoid that. And the Suns signed Thaddeus Young today. I don't know if that does anything for you. Do you like the Royce O'Neal acquisition for the Suns? I assume you do.
I do a lot. Defensive versatility. They're always trying to find that 5th man. I think his ability to guard multiple positions, help them on ball, off ball. I think that's a major plus as they try and figure out, okay, who can we put alongside these 3 to make this work? Can we mix in some KD at the 5 lineup? So I like Royce O'Neal's fit. I just think it's a really good value for them as far as like we can trust him to do things on both ends of the floor.
Let's just do the Suns now, because that's one of my other big questions. They're sort of like they're not at all similar in terms of their history together or their collective accomplishments together, whatever. But they're kind of my Bucks equivalent in the West, where it's like it's kind of put up or shut up time now. And like, how good actually are you? Like, the noise is over, trade deadline's over, Beal's healthy. You're starting to get a sample size of the whole team together. The numbers with the three best guys on the floor are dynamite. Nurkic has been healthy, and yet they're sitting here 31 and 22. Good. You haven't quite got the sense that this is like a dynamite championship level team yet. Stretches here, stretches there. Is there that kind of team in here? Like, what's your gut on the Suns, and what are they missing in terms of, like, when you watch them, what feels short to you?
I wish that they would lean into more of their movement with their best players and keep their tempo up and lean into the versatility and be able to let Bradley Beal pass and cut, let Kevin Durant come off option screens, use Devin Booker off handoffs, and lean into that. My problem with Phoenix is those games where shot making is part of the program for them. It just has to be. They're going to take and make those kind of shots. When they lean into too much ISO and pick and roll, I think you let the defense off the hook to a degree. And their defense hasn't hit the right note for me to really believe in it in a playoff context. Like, I would like for them to just be a little bit better. Like, I've been nicer to Nurk than most people defensively. It hasn't felt like it's hit on that end. So that's where I feel like it's missing. Because if I'm, oh, good.
I think Nurk's been good, but I like good. Like, I was totally wrong on the Ayton Nurkic de facto swap. I thought it was pretty risky for the Suns, even knowing all the toxicity that was in Phoenix with Ayton and just how everybody needed to wash their hands of the whole thing. I just didn't trust Nurkic's health. I don't like trading younger for older if the talent is roughly equivalent. Ayton can't get out of his own way in Portland. Like, every time they put a microphone in front of him, he says something regrettable. And Nurkic has been pretty reliable. And yet I don't use this word in the way most people use it, because they're not soft, like they're soft-willed or weak or anything like that. It just doesn't feel they come off as soft to me in the sense that it just doesn't feel like opposing offenses are all that worried about, oh God, we got to face the Phoenix Suns defense. Like, this is going to be a battle. We're going to get some sharp elbows. They're really going to make us feel them. It just doesn't, they just feel a little bit soft, isn't the right word. Just a little bit small and a little bit non-threatening on defense in a way that makes me nervous.
Nah, I'm with that. I am with that. But is the trade-off there offensively?
It has to be.
To deal with those three in a playoff series doesn't seem ideal.
Well, Book's, to your point about the motion and the handoffs, and like, this is what all the X's and O's nerds want, is like, can you run this and more of this and less of that ISO stuff? You watch that Warriors game from over the weekend, that epic Warriors game. And Book is cooking down the stretch of that game. One-on-one shot after one-on-one shot. Watch Durant on those possessions. Durant is doing nothing. Like, he's standing in the right corner, not moving, doing nothing, which is like, if Book is cooking like that, that's cool. But I don't know. It's just something I'm watching, because I don't know that Kevin Durant wants to win. And when Devin Booker's shots go in, you'll see a fist pump and all that. But I don't know how psyched Kevin Durant is to just be chilling over there watching the Devin Booker show. But boy, to your point, like, if you told me this team was in the finals, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I guess at this point, I'd be mildly surprised if they won 3 playoff series in the West. But I would never count any team with KD and Book. I would never count out.
No, it's just when they start to dip into, we get a mismatch, you have to double, and oh yeah, that's Devin Booker and Bradley Beal over there next to each other against a rotating defense. They have, like, the high notes they can hit offensively are where I can't let them go, especially in a playoff context. That's just a lot to deal with.
I mean, I thought they were going to take Denver to the hilt last year in the playoffs, and I was surprised. I mean, they folded again. That's what they've had 2 straight seasons of just totally embarrassing fold jobs in Game 6 of the same round, and we'll see what they do this year. But I wouldn't A lot of it is Beal. Like, how good is Beal? And I think Beal's pretty damn good. I like the Royce O'Neal signing. It's the same with the Bucks. It's like, I just kind of want to see it now. Like, it's time. Show me it for 20, 25 games that you can be in the conversation with these 4 teams above you in the standings, all of whom are good enough to make the finals. Give me another. What, you know what? Before we leave the West, you just brought up who wins the West. Let's talk about the Lakers and the Warriors. Are you starting to believe in either or both as like legitimate threats to win 1 or 2 playoff rounds?
Ooh.
If they get there, because step 1 for them, to be clear, is like get out of the 9-10 bracket in the Western Conference play-in, where they would eliminate the other right now in the first play-in game.
Which, by the way, it'd be very interesting if we did end up with the world's greatest play-in of Phoenix, Dallas, LA, and Golden State. But that's for a different day. I would probably, right? Think about that.
Oh my God.
I wouldn't doubt them in that setting. I wouldn't doubt them in that setting. The question for me would be do they have enough? Which seems wild, considering one team has LeBron and AD, the other one has Steph Curry and is the Warriors. It's a tough series. It's going 6 or 7.
No, I'm talking about like could they? Oh, I'm talking about like, do you believe in them? Could they, if they get in, could they win 1 or 2 actual playoff rounds? Could we see them in the conference semifinals or the conference finals?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yep. I could see him. Star power, playoff game plan. I can see it.
Inexperience at the top of the West in a couple of cases.
It seems wild. It's no disrespect to Minnesota OKC, but hey, if you have a lineup where you can switch against Minnesota, do you bog them down? Are you able to mess around against OKC and show help off certain players and try and contain the drives? Hope you get the whistle in the playoffs. I could see it. I could see them winning a round.
A round is fine. When we start talking about 2 rounds, you got to be consistently really good against elite competition for quite a number of games. And like, maybe they can do it. I mean, the Lakers, I'm looking now, have won 4 out of 5, including kind of landmark for them road wins at Boston, at New York. At Boston, obviously, was without AD and LeBron. Kind of an alarming loss for the Celtics. Old news at this point. What do the Lakers have going for them? What's changed recently? Why do they look like a more cohesive team right now?
I think the pathways are easier for them lineup wise. I think that when you look at them, they have size and length, and they're able to, when they are able to just put their lineups together and let guys play, and D'Angelo Russell is out there making plays, and Austin Reeves feels more comfortable. Anthony Davis has been incredible on both ends of the floor. And you have LeBron. I think you can build the boat around that a little bit easier. And I think even the moments where they played Denver and lost, they were competitive. Being able to show that activity defensively, I think, helps them. So that's where I kind of buy into that a little bit. For Golden State, they've been Draymond at the 5 has been really fun to watch, as well as Klay figuring it out, which is a very odd dynamic of Klay being extremely vulnerable and also still figuring this part out to where, I'll find a different role. I'll make some shots. We'll be fine. Do you believe in either one of them?
Look, I don't think either one can win the championship.
Okay.
I would be surprised if either one were in the conference finals. Mildly surprised. Just because like the level of consistency you need to get there is so high, and these teams have not demonstrated it yet. But I will not count them out. As for the Lakers, I have been begging all year for them to play Hachimura more, and saying on this podcast over and over again, like an idiot, that their best 4-man combination of players is the 2 stars, Reeves and Hachimura. I just like the defensive versatility. I know it's not as quick on the perimeter maybe as you'd like. They are starting those 4 now, and after a slow start to the season, they're +4 per 100 possessions with those 4 together on the floor. I just think they need to lean all the way into that. By the way, kind of slid under the radar after in the aftermath of, I guess it didn't slide under the radar because Spencer Dinwiddie like went on a whole like I'm gonna just start attending games everywhere and hanging out with people whose teams I want to be on. Maybe I'm, we all do this with like one waiver signing, post waiver signing every year. We blow it up out of proportion. I think Dinwiddie could really help the Lakers. And like, I just think, look, the Brooklyn thing, something was going wrong in Brooklyn, and he just wasn't engaged in the way that he needs to be engaged, and they weren't engaging him in the way that maybe he wanted to be engaged. Whatever, something was wrong. But you look at the numbers, like I looked at the tracking data 2-3 weeks ago. He's still one of the most efficient pick and roll players in the league. Like I was blown away by the numbers because of how disengaged he looks. When he runs pick and roll, the results are consistently really, really good. And they just need someone who can get north-south on this team. Someone who can just get into the teeth of the defense, who isn't LeBron, and compromise the defense and kick out, or like maybe finish at the rim. Like D'Angelo Russell has been on a heater for a month. He does not do that. Austin Reeves kind of doesn't really do that either. He kind of meanders and half spins and fakes and draws fouls and takes fadeaway 12-foot jumpers, and he's quite good at all those things. He's a very good playmaker. Just give me someone who's like, let me dispense with all this and go zoop and get to the rim and throw some lobs. And Dinwiddie, for all the noise, can do like. Would you be surprised if Dinwiddie were closing occasional games at least for the Lakers, like as part of the closing five? I would not be.
I would not be surprised by that at all. I think that's part of the vision. I think they've wanted to find ways to have guys make more plays around LeBron and AD. So if you tell me potentially it's a 3-guard lineup plus LeBron and AD, I wouldn't be surprised by that. I think it's a big bonus. His ability to self-create, his ability to score, get in the paint, play pick and roll.
Give me, forget 3-guard lineup. Give me Dinwiddie, Reeves, LeBron, Hachimura, Davis. Like you signed Hachimura, you paid him all this money. Play the guy. It's not like he's not Michael Jordan or anything. I just think he's pretty good.
Are you completely anti 3-guard lineup for the Lakers?
No. I just like
Rui time.
I don't want Rui to get shoved over to the side again, because I think, look, his playoff shooting last year was like one in 100 years. Like he'll never shoot like that again for a 6-week span. But every championship team has a run, like a guy who goes on a run like that and makes shots. I just think he's good. What else on the Lakers?
Do you think their defense could be better in the playoffs because they do have size, they do have length?
I trust their defense because they're big. LeBron's old, but he's maybe the smartest player in the whole league. He always knows where to be, and people are scared of him. Like people are scared to drive on him, and AD's AD, and they're gonna get a good whistle every game. And I trust their defense. I think this almost sounds strange, and I might be being caught up in the moment. If you ask me which of these teams has a higher upside, like who's ceiling, not a single game, because we've seen what the Lakers can do for a single game, for a single 2-week period, is higher. The Warriors have something going right now. Like you mentioned, starting Draymond at the 5 has kind of unlocked the Kuminga-Wiggins duo along with Draymond. Clay, we will get into soon. Wiggins has shown a pulse. Pajemski's just flat out good. Like that guy's a good player, and Kuminga is really good. And they, with that group, have found their identity. They look alternatively like the Warriors of peak Steph in terms of how the ball moves and how bodies move. And boy, that shot against Phoenix over the weekend is just an all-timer. And then they have this other identity that they've been kind of flirting with, and we've all been hoping they get to, which is like, okay, all that stuff doesn't work. Can we just give the ball to like the 6'8" tank who can jump to the top of the backboard and dunk on people, and Kuminga, and have that little dose of sort of side offense? It's working, man. And Draymond, I said this on NBA Today when the Nurkic thing happened. It made me sad that all we were talking about was the suspensions and the violent stuff, and from Poole till now, because this dude is still one of the 5 or 10 best defensive players in the NBA. Like there's just, you can't even get to one hand worth of fingers listing the number of guys with his versatility. he's really ties them all together on defense. I don't know, man. I would be scared of this team in the first round of the playoffs if I was one of the top seeds.
They just look way more comfortable. You mentioned Kuminga. It's not just that he's been aggressive, and sometimes he overdoes it, but he's aggressive within their context, with movement, the seals. I like that. I think defensively,
dude, he seals people and they fall out of bounds. Like he's so strong. There are dudes just like in the cameraman. Like, what happened? Oh, Jonathan Kuminga sealed him.
And he adds a dose for them in transition. I think that's a plus. I think defensively, Wiggins, Clay, and Kuminga have felt better during this stretch as far as we're navigating screens. Draymond's got our back. We know our job. We know our task. And I just think everything's kind of fallen back in line to where, okay, they sounded like a team for most of the year that was like, we can get to a place. Now we're kind of seeing where that might be. And now it feels like a race against time almost.
I'll tell you, they look really good. And Podziemski and Kuminga are ready. Like, they're ready on what is left of Steph's timeline, whatever that is, however long that lasts. And this dude, he's taking 13 threes per 36 minutes. It would be the second highest number of his career in any season. He's taken 16 in the last 3 games, and he has 2 games of 20-plus three-point attempts in the last, 10 games. It's crazy how many shots he's getting up, how many threes he's getting up. And he's still the same degree of difficulty, same highlight. He's still the best show in the NBA is still Steph Curry on a hot streak. He had one with, I think they were in Indiana last week, where he made 7 threes in a row in the first quarter, and the whole Pacers crowd was just going crazy. It was like, it sounded like a Warriors home game. You mentioned Clay. Why did you mention Clay? You said Clay figuring it out. What did you mean by that?
I think it's more just understanding when the shots are going to come, where they're going to come, and what this team needs from him. I think that part has been key for me. And hierarchy-wise, understanding how it shifted to a degree to where they still need him, but he doesn't have to force it sometimes, if that makes sense. You've kind of felt that kind of shift sometimes. Like, obviously, I think he had the 4 for 19 game against Atlanta, but he's had a couple nights where, okay, I don't have this going. Let me contribute that. I think figuring out that portion helps the Warriors out overall.
You know, Clay gave that very raw interview after the Nets game where the Warriors won in Brooklyn and he was benched in crunch time, where he said, yeah, this is hard for me to go from one of the best guys in the league to not playing. Of course it's hard. And after that, Marcus Thompson, who covers the Warriors for The Athletic, wrote what I thought was a really great piece and a really fair piece about how this is a player coming to terms with the death of the player that he used to be. And trying to understand the good player that is still in there, that he still can be for this team. And I thought it was a really fair piece. I don't know that, I wonder how it was received in Clay world. And I don't use that facetiously. I mean, like, the people around Clay. And one of the points that Marcus made in the piece was just what you just said. And I've said before, his passing to me, particularly this season, his passing, his ball movement is kind of a bellwether for how he's playing and how the Warriors are playing. And I don't mean that Clay is going to suddenly average like 8 assists a game. And Marcus made this point. I mean, quite simply, as long as Klay Thompson plays in the NBA, he is going to be treated like one of the most dangerous shooters who has ever lived. People are going to be in his jersey at all times. When he comes around a pin down screen, which the Warriors do a million times a game, 2 guys are going to jump out at him because he's Klay Thompson. And if he's open, you're going to be very worried about it. And I think Marcus's point was basically like 4 times a game in that situation, Klay is taking leaning, crazy, off the dribble 3-pointers, trying to find the Klay that used to be there, that used to be able to make those shots and can't make those shots anymore, at least enough to justify them. If you turn those 4 shots into 4 simple bounce passes to whoever just set the pin down screen for him and so is rolling into open space, Kuminga, Saric, Looney, Jackson Davis, whoever, and keep the machine moving, that's really all it is. A Klay who does that 4 times is still a really good player because he can guard up on defense. He guarded Markkanen last night. They blew out the Jazz. I think that's really all it is. And I think that guy can still be a good player. And I think that's the transformation. And I understand why. Well, I guess I can't understand because I've never achieved anything at his level, but like that must be a hard thing to kind of internalize. Like I used to make those crazy leaning shots and they used to take your soul from you if you were the other team. I would make 2 in a row. You'd call a timeout. The crowd would be going crazy and I'd have you. And I can't do that anymore.
No, I agree. I think that is a tough portion of it. But I think you got to trust I trust he would figure it out. I think he's headed in that direction. I think the team playing well, the team playing better will help that. And honestly, you add to that point where you made, hey, if it's 4 bounce passes, if you keep the machine moving, it might come back to you. And if it comes back to you, now you see that success, okay, now that revs us up even more. So that's where I'm like, okay, maybe the Warriors have something there.
And they were pretty active at the trade deadline from what I heard. In terms of like buying. They are operating like a team who's like, if we have Steph, we're trying to win every they looked hard at Olynyk. I'm not quite sure what was going out in that deal. I actually heard it wasn't Moses Moody. You think it was? I'm not sure that it was. Obviously, it wasn't Kuminga or Podziemski. Kuminga was a hard no, like from the start. Caruso, they would have loved to get Caruso from the Bulls. I just don't think there was any common ground there. Those are the 2 names that I heard a lot of. The dangerous team. It's just the consistency, right? Is like teams that are 28 and 26 or 28 and 26 and 25 in the Warriors case have that record because they just can't put it together. It's hard to you've been in the league. It's hard to be great 4 times out of 5 nights, 4 games out of 5 games. It's hard to do that. And that's the only way you advance in the playoffs. And like the teams above them have proven whatever our ceiling is, we can approach it damn near every night. And I just need to see these 2 teams do it, but their ceilings are scary. Give me another big question, unless you have parting thoughts on this.
I have another question for you.
Go.
Can the Knicks and the Sixers hold on?
It's a big question.
We have seen the good from the Knicks, especially once they got OG Anunoby. That defense turned to a different machine. They added more depth. I love Bogey and Alec Burks for them. I would like them more if Julius Randle and OG were also there. But I understand injuries are injuries. Jalen Brunson's been incredible. You're adding more shooting around it. You now have the scenario where teams are saying, you know what, Jalen Brunson, not you, a lot earlier than you would expect. Throwing 2 on the ball, which should be a plus in theory, because, hey, we can get a team in rotation. But also, now are we matchup hunting if we're New York and looking to get switches for Jalen Brunson and teams are doubling and helping? Are we doing a little bit too much of that? So can they hold on to what they found until they get healthy again? Philadelphia, adding Buddy Hield, I thought was really good.
Me too.
I think obviously what he does shooting-wise, scoring-wise will help once Joel Embiid, or if Joel Embiid is able to return. I also think it helps in the short term because Tyrese Maxey got a little dose of coaches sitting down and meeting and saying, we're taking you away. We're going to trap you. And the playmaking growth is one thing. It's a little different when it's 2 on the ball or teams looking to help or the space isn't the same. So having Buddy Hield, who you can use him and Maxey together off ball in actions and let Maxey get downhill that way, or have Buddy Hield screen for Tyrese Maxey, I think is a plus. But now can they find enough to hold on to the status they had? Or are they just going to end up playing against each other in the first round?
Well, it would be interesting if you went to Philadelphia today and said, hey, the basketball gods come to the Sixers and say, hey, we'll just work some magic and you can just be the 5 seed. We'll just stick you in the 5 seed. I wonder if they would sign up for that like their whole team is hurt. Batum's hurt, Melton's hurt, Harris is hurt, Embiid's hurt. I can't even keep track of who's hurt. Look, both these teams are so happy that the All-Star break is here and so happy that the All-Star break is now a week long because that's a third to a quarter of how much Anunoby is going to miss reportedly. Randall, hopefully a lot of that he'll get much closer to being back after that. But, a lot of this is just like the race to get out of Boston's half of the bracket. I don't know if either team is sort of holds Boston in that regard. Like we really want to get on the other side of the bracket from them. I think they just need to get healthy. Of these teams in terms of holding on, if holding on is staying in the 4 or 5 area or staying out of play-in danger, I think I have more faith in the Knicks just because they're a little deeper when they get healthy. They're a little deeper when they're injured than Philly. And they just have that Tibbs, like, we'll just manufacture some wins by beating the hell out of you and getting 25 offensive rebounds.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Have the Knicks done enough to knock on the Boston Celtics door and say you're not going to have fun?
So this is going to sound a little nuts, considering I picked Boston to win the championship. Boston is 41-12. Started 26-6, 15-6 since then. Not quite as dominant, just regular, very good. And in a way, it's comforting that when you slip from dominance, you're still like one of the 4 to 5 best teams in the league statistically. I think they're 4th in net rating since they were in that 15-6 stretch. I think they're going through a little bit of like a, can we just get to the playoffs malaise? Can we just get to All-Star malaise? I'm still picking Boston to win the title. I'm not coming off that. I'm sticking with it, come hell or high water. Just like I stuck with my Milwaukee Clippers finals pick last year. Did not work out for me. I do think the Knicks can scare the Celtics. I think the Knicks can give the Celtics a real series if they get there. That's the problem, right? Like if depending on who you face and what bracket you're in, you may not get the chance. But I think the Knicks could beat any team in the Eastern Conference in a 7-game series. I would not give them a good chance to beat Boston. Like, I think that's a 75-25 series for the Celtics, maybe even better than that. But the others are, Philly's just such a wild card. We don't know what we're going to get out of Philly and Embiid when it's go time. I think the Knicks could beat Milwaukee in a playoff series. I don't know who I would pick in that series as of today. I would probably default to just like Milwaukee's got the best guy. But I think that's a real series. We've seen them beat Cleveland. They have played Boston pretty tough. Less so this season after the season opener, which was a very close game. Last year, they had Boston's number. I just think something about their style of play is very bothersome for teams. They're just physical and they pound you and they go one-on-one and they don't turn the ball over. They win the possession game every single game. Like I said, I think it's probably like 75-25, 80-20 Boston. But if we woke up and like that was a playoff series in the second round, it's like, all right, let's look ahead to Game 7 in Boston, Celtics Knicks. I wouldn't be shocked. Would you?
No.
Answer your own question.
I wouldn't be shocked if the Knicks won Game 1 in Boston. That feels like a very Tibbs has a game plan, we have depth type beat. I think that Boston is very good. I have Boston going to the finals. My question is now, can we get Boston in a scenario where they get in their own way? Can we get them in those moments where they play too slow late in games? Can we get them in those scenarios where we're focused in on attacking a certain matchup and we're not making you feel the weight of our entire lineup? Because their top 5 is very good. Their top 6 is very good. We've seen them make teams pay with Porzingis, rolling, spacing, attacking switches. Tatum's been very good. Brown's been good. White and Holiday, tough to deal with. But will they bog down in a way that we might be able to steal this one? And does that change the momentum? That's pretty much my only question with Boston. Can they get out of their own way?
I was listening I didn't see the quotes, but during one of Boston's recent games, I think it might have been on ESPN, the announcers were talking about how Joe Mazzulla said something to the effect of like, one of the things that concerns me is our guys getting weighed down by the pressure and the moment and the stakes in the playoffs. And I just kind of want us to go back to, hey, win, lose, whatever. Let's enjoy the journey and just be able to say we played our way the whole time. And him verbalizing that, I didn't know whether it should make me nervous. Like, can you not just say the P word, pressure? Like, can you just not say it? Because I do think you're going to face it. And everyone knows how close you've gotten to the top of the mountain in what is now a very long era of top tier contention, but not gotten to the top and the pressure that brings. Or should I be relieved that you're facing it head on and telling your team, just play. And if we just play, we're the best team. I don't know the answer to that, but him saying it was very interesting to me. if I'm paraphrasing it correctly, as I'm going off the top of my head here. But getting in their own way is an interesting way to put it. There has been a little bit of slippage in their play in the last month, but not anything that is really alarming to me. If anything, everyone focuses on their crunch time offense, and they've earned that. Their crunch time offense has been scattershot, let's say. I think they have another gear to hit defensively when the games really matter, and that is when they get really, really tough, is when they scheme you in all sorts of funky ways and switch it up every possession, and everyone is totally dialed in defensively. I think that's their trump card. I think that's like, yeah, we might have a bad night on offense. We might get a little stagnant. We never get to the goddamn rim. Can you please get to the rim more? But we have this impenetrable defense where like Jaylen Brown's the 5th best defensive player on the floor. Like that's how good we can get. I don't know how we started talking about Boston. I guess the Knicks. Yeah, the East is, both conferences are just kind of wild right now. How every week brings like, oh, this team's back. Oh, this team's in a slump. It's been kind of a fun season.
I've always liked the Orlando, Indiana, Miami win streak that pushes one of them to 6, and it's like, oh, here they come, and then oh, there they go.
Speaking of a couple of those teams, can I ask you one of my big questions?
Yes.
For the rest of the season, we're going to go down the standings a little bit now, Steve, where the stakes are not quite as high, and the lens is a little longer. One of my big questions for the rest of the season, now that the trade deadline is in the books, is okay. So what's the plan with Trae Young? Like what do we actually think of Trae Young as a player on this Hawks team? Is it time to start envisioning what Trae Young would look in different contexts? And if so, what are those contexts? Can the Hawks put together 10 days of like looking like they have their house in order? Now DeAndre Hunter's back. Capella will be back at some point. Okongwu's playing really well. DeJounte didn't get traded. Everyone's here. I don't know. You've talked about it. I listen to your podcast regularly, but like, give me just like the Steve Jones Jr. Like, where are you on the Trae Young scale from on one hand, NBA know-it-all calling him a loser, and on the other hand, enraged Hawks fan who's like, how dare he not make the All-Star team? He's the best player in the NBA. In that continuum, where are you?
Per the brand, I'm in the middle. I think Trae Young is very talented. I think the issue is, what does the talent do as far as impacting winning? And what can you do around him to build up a winner? And I think my biggest thing with Atlanta is the defense has never moved to a point where I feel good about it. And like I saw the vision. I was like, early, I was like, hey, DeAndre Hunter, usage is up. Jalen Johnson doing fun things. Here comes Bogdanovich. There's a lot of positives. But then I'm like, I look at the other end of the floor and I'm like, okay, you guys are trying to be more active defensively, put 2 on the ball. Didn't really work. Rotations aren't great. Now you're in drop. That also isn't working. Transition isn't great. So this beautiful offense that you have doesn't have the same impact or value because you give it right back immediately. Like, I mean, you give up 136 points to a Bulls team that people...
Every time, literally last night, a friend of mine, we'll just call him Tim, his name is Tim, is a Bulls fan. I would describe him as like a casual NBA fan, but a Bulls fan. Texts me while I'm watching games, I'm not paying attention, text me like, when is just a classic like guy that's not in the NBA but is in your life NBA question? Hey, when is the NBA going to do something about this scoring problem? I'm like, geez, I wonder why Tim, Bulls fan, has this on his mind. Oh, they're playing the Hawks. Every time this question is raised, it's because of a Hawks game. Like it's unbelievable. To your point about like 136 to the Bulls, Luka has 73. They should put in the Hall of Fame. They should put a running video of the Atlanta's double teams of Luka Doncic in that game and say, this is the worst any team has ever looked rotating behind a double team. It should be in the wing of like bad basketball that I think they should have in the Hall of Fame. Anyway, Hawks, please go.
If you could get somewhere defensively to where I could believe there's some fight, like you mentioned the point about Phoenix and teams don't feel you. I just don't feel like anyone looks at Atlanta and they're unafraid of what they can run offensively. And that's a dangerous place to be in today's NBA, where a whole bunch of teams can make those same reads and get to ball movement. Even the ones you don't think are very good, they can still get you rotating and scrambling. I'm in a tough spot with them because there's talent and potential, but it never feels like it's maximized. And I don't even know if it's Trae's fault at this point. I don't even know if I point to him. I'm just like, what is the overall goal of what you're accomplishing?
So
like, how long can they sustain defense? Is it longer than 10 seconds?
I thought you were going to say 10 minutes, and I was going to say it's less than that. 10 seconds. If Jalen Johnson is on the floor, we can get to 10 seconds. If absent that, I'm not sure we can do it. Trae Young gets no credit anymore for the 2021 conference finals run. None. People dismiss it as like no. I'm saying this is wrong. I think this is unfair.
Mm-hmm.
People dismiss it as a fluke. The Knicks were bad, and they were in the playoffs. The Sixers were falling apart. Ben Simmons threw the pass. All the focus on the other teams. I think it's like you don't get to the conference finals completely by accident. Like, remember Portland had the run to the conference finals in 2019 when they were on the right side of the bracket. They got injury luck, and then they got rolled by the Warriors in the conference finals, even though Durant was hurt. And in 2, 3, 4 years out, you started to hear like, oh yeah, Dame got to the conference finals once, but that was a fluke. Like, getting to the conference finals is hard. Ask the Clippers. As I always say about the conference finals, ask the Clippers, who could never, ever get there until this particular season we're talking about, 2021. And I look back, you watch that Boston-Atlanta series from last year, which was the first-round series. It opens with Boston just destroying the Hawks in the first 2 games. Hawks didn't even look like they belonged on the same court as Boston. Trae Young deserves some blame for that defensively. The Hawks got dangerously close to bringing that series back to Game 7 in Boston. And the only reason they got that close was Trae Young started going crazy and completely picking apart the Celtics defense, one of the best defenses in the NBA. Celtics defense was an A+ level in that series or close. But by the end of Game 6, which Boston squeaked out in Atlanta, the Celtics were like, can we just be done with this dude? Because we don't have an answer for this little dude offensively. And to your point about if we can just take that and put it on a roster that can cover for him defensively, provided he's giving enough effort, and I think he's giving more effort this year, that the offensive talent is extraordinary. Like, he is a one-man offense. He's a one-man top 10 NBA offense. There are not a lot of guys like that. I just look around and like, the Hawks clearly don't have that team as of now. And they didn't trade DeJounte Murray. And look, I'm just telling you, I have no idea what the Hawks are going to want to do in the offseason. I have no idea how this is part of the reason why I'm so fascinated by the next 20 games. If this team shows me something, shows themselves something in the next 25 games, in the play-in, in the playoffs, if they get there, that, hey, this architecture is worth keeping, that's interesting too. If they don't, I think at the very least, there are going to be a couple teams around the league who call and say, hey, what is Trae? Can we get Trae? Like, can we at least start a conversation about Trae? And that makes me start to have the internal conversation of like, who makes sense for Trae Young? So I ask you, just as a thought exercise, Steve Jones Jr., is there a team that you imagine in a realistic trade scenario where like, oh, Trae would actually look pretty good there?
The realistic part hurt me, but Brooklyn.
It's a good name.
That kind of roster would intrigue me. Now, can I think of another one, though?
Well, so Mark Stein mentioned two in his newsletter yesterday. One is the Lakers, which is much rumored around the league that when the Lakers get 3 first-round picks, get access to 3 first-round picks in the summer, Trae is one of the stars that they would potentially, maybe, possibly go hunting for. It's interesting. The other team Mark Stein mentioned is the Spurs. And, you know, that's Wembanyama and defense and all that stuff. And I've long been intrigued by the idea of like pair Trae with like a super duper version of Capella, like a top 5 defender in the entire NBA. What does that look like? And who also complements him on offense? What does that look like? I don't think either team has even arrived close to the point where they're even thinking about this, to be clear. That's one. Chicago's an obvious one. I don't really see anything there. Well, maybe. I don't know. Let me ask you this. Is there anything that makes sense about Trae Young with Banchero and Franz Wagner in Orlando?
Yes, it makes sense. Ooh, that makes a lot of sense.
By the way, I'm not asking that in a leading way. I don't know if I don't know if my brain can even handle any of that right now.
It makes sense. My thing is, I like the way Orlando has built it to where we know Paolo can do things playmaking wise. I think he's grown. We know Franz can do things playmaking wise, and we have our guards just do their job. Occasionally mix in a drive, occasionally run a pick and roll, but y'all don't have to handle the bulk of it. I think Trae would help them shooting wise, spacing wise, playmaking wise. How much would that affect the hierarchy, I guess? Would you stunt growth that way? Do you need to make a move right now? Is where my head goes.
So my head goes to the Magic obviously need a guard, like any guard, a guard who can shoot. And Suggs is getting there. I love Suggs. Keep Suggs. Everyone loves Suggs. Trae Young can shoot and run offense and all that. It's just it's confusing the vision in that Wagner and Banchero have the ball a lot and operate with the ball, which is what Trae Young does. And neither settles super easily into like a distant second or co-star off-ball role. And that's a sea change to your team. On the other hand, this team does have the size and versatility, at least the outlines of the kind of team that can cover for Trae Young defensively, particularly, and this is where the vision really gets confusing, if like Jonathan Isaac is ever going to be we can count on this guy to play 25 minutes every single game player, he's kind of approaching that. It's more like 19 to 22 minutes a game recently. But oh my God, this guy, he's insane. He's always been insane on defense, but now we're seeing it over extended time. And it's like, you can't get away from him. You can't see around him. It's unbelievable how good he is. So I'm not unintrigued. That's all.
That makes sense. But being able to watch Isaac and Suggs play defense is very fun, especially for an Orlando team that is based on that defense being their identity. Like if you want to have fun, if you watch the league, watch an Orlando game when they play a sparsely attended crowd and listen for their coaching staff yelling out defensive instructions. It's one of my favorite subplots.
What should I listen for? What should the people listen for? What do they yell?
Low man! You're gonna hear that about 15 times. or if you catch a free throw, they'll call out what the action is. It's very fun.
Don't make me do my my Tibbs impression of him saying low man. I don't want to do it. What were we talking about? Isaac. Oh, this is all just pie in the sky stuff. The only reason I asked the question is because if I'm Landry Fields or who's ever running the Hawks right now, I've kept the team together. I didn't do anything of substance at the trade deadline. Now this becomes a laboratory. Now I want to see, like, can we get any continuity? Can we get somewhere with this team? Even if we lose in the first round or whatever, do I see something that's like, okay, Trae and DeJounte, this actually works? If not, I gotta open up some options. That's all. The other problem is they're facing is they traded their picks to San Antonio. So if I trade Trae Young to another team, that's probably going to be good because they have Trae Young or at least decent. Well, their picks, which are coming back to me, are not going to be great. My picks, which is the whole point of a rebuild, are in the hands of San Antonio. That doesn't seem great. I think that's why people start speculating about the Spurs as a trade partner. And the two did talk about DeJounte Murray, but anyway. You got one last big question for me that I can answer in one sentence, or have we covered all your big questions?
Who on earth wins Coach of the Year?
Oh, I can do that in one sentence. Okay, let me go through it right now. I don't have a ballot this year, but let's see. It's funny how this goes, right? So 25 games in, it was like, oh, Jamal Mosley, no brainer. It's going to be Jamal Mosley. 40 games in, it was Mark Daigneault. It's got to be Mark Daigneault. Then there was like a little Chris Finch, like, oh, maybe it's Chris Finch. Then it was like, is it maybe Ty Lue? Like Ty Lue figured this one out with the Clippers. Then it was like, wait, is it Tibbs? Is it maybe Tibbs for imposing his identity as a team? Is it maybe Doc Rivers for coaching the All-Star game in world record time? Is it maybe him? Then it's like, wait, JB Bickerstaff, can we really give it to him after the playoffs last year? If I had to guess right now, projecting what the voting pool would do, I think probably Dagnall would win. If the Thunder are first or second in the West, I think it'll be Dagnall. I don't know who I would vote for right now. It probably someone who I just mentioned I would vote for. But what's your take? Who's your opinion?
I'm glad you mentioned the journey because I've been on that the entire time. I probably would lean Dagnall right now. Thinking about Bickerstaff, I do love that. In no point was it Joe Mazzulla, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with that.
I've been on the Joe Mazzulla. I've been a Joe Mazzulla defender. He became, I think, an unfair object of ridicule last year. And I've had enough conversations with Joe Mazzulla at games and stuff to like, he's one of those guys, you start talking to him about basketball, he's going to make your ass feel stupid real fast. Like if you went to Joe Mazzulla and were like, how come you don't call timeout? He would be like, all right, name the game. And he would tell you, oh, this was happening, this was happening, this was happening. He'd be like, oh, this dude's on another level. I'm going to just shrink back into my turtle shell right now.
I think Joe Mazzulla deserves a little bit more respect. One, he's also very candid or getting more candid. I just like they had a lot of pieces they had to move together offensively and defensively, and he deserves a little bit more praise for the job he's done to get them to this level.
I hope he's not watching the movie The Town as often as he said he was last year, which was, I think, twice weekly or some crazy number. I'll tell you this, though. If the Wolves end up number one in the West, Chris Finch is going to get a lot of votes because that was a roster that people were worried, like, does this actually work? Does it fit? These two bigs together, and it's working right now. Okay, Steve Jones Jr., where can we look for you this week? What do we got?
The Dunker Spot. Listen to it. Available on all podcasts. Available on YouTube, on JJ Redick's YouTube channel. And that's it. I'm really good at plugging stuff.
You are very elite at plugging stuff, and your Twitter handle is Steve Jones Jr., right? Your X handle, whatever we're saying it.
Steve Jones 20.
Steve Jones 20. See, I just type Steve and it comes up.
That's all right. Get it 2.0 Junior.
If you want to know what's going on in an NBA game, whatever handle he just said, go to that and you'll learn what's going on. Steve Jones 2.0. Thank you for your time. I'll see you around the block.
We'll see you.
And all right, it's time to bring in a man who covers the most under-the-radar, scorching hot team in the NBA. I've already done one segment on these guys in the last couple weeks with Tim Bontemps. I got complaints that it was too Bontemps-y, it was too negative, he was too down on the team. So we want to bring someone in closer to the team, and of course, fresh off a dispiriting home loss to the Philadelphia 76ers, who didn't have like anybody except Tyrese Maxey and Buddy Hield going crazy. Chris Fedor of Cleveland.com. You cover the Cleveland Cavaliers. How are you, sir?
Zach, I'm doing great. How are you, man?
I'm good. So here's where we are. Despite that loss, weird loss, no Dean Wade. The jingle is coming back in this episode, right. By the way. It's happening. I mean, you see what happens when you take Dean Wade away from the team. You can have Garland, you can have Mobley, you have no Dean Wade.
Hey, man. With him on the court, 102 defensive rating. With him off the court, 112 defensive rating. The numbers speak for themselves.
Not yet. The Cavs are 22-5 in their last 27 games. 17-2 in their last 19 games. Oh, you can tell me schedule, this, that. You don't go 17-2 in essentially a 25% of the NBA season without being a serious goddamn team. And they are up to 4th in net rating for the league. They're 15th in offense, but they've been just about number 1 over the last 6 weeks of the season, and 2nd in defense. So that fearsome defense that carried them to the playoffs, where it didn't quite work out for them, although the defense was okay, has sustained. And what's interesting about the Cavs is this is the magic of the 82-game season. You never know when a team is going to land upon an identity and sort of just organically discover the best version of itself. And amid the crisis of Darius Garland breaking his jaw and Evan Mobley getting injured, 2 of their foundational 4 players, the Cavs found an identity that they had talked about wanting to find before the season. Pace, passing, threes. And then they've sort of managed to carry over the best elements of it, the foundational elements of it, with Garland back and Mobley back, and they've kept on rolling. And Chris, it's almost like they're very interesting. They have 3 different teams within a team, and they're all working. They have the starters, who are actually statistically the worst version of the Cavaliers, but still that group is now the 4 best players, the 2 guards and the 2 bigs, is plus 5 or 6 per 100 possessions. That's very good. Then you have Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen are tethered together with shooting around them and sometimes a Coro around them who's making threes. That group, that version of the team, those 2 on, Mobley and Garland off, plus 13 per 100 possessions. Then you flip it around, Garland and Mobley play while Mitchell and Allen sit. That version of the team, plus 16 per 100 possessions. And the eye test is just, they are flying on offense. And by flying, I don't mean running helter-skelter fast break basketball, and they've mixed in more fast breaks. I mean, you and I sat down before the season and talked about how this team cannot win, regardless of who plays with whom, if it's just, okay, hand me the ball, okay, pick and roll that everyone sees coming 20 seconds in advance. We can load up on it, particularly when the 2 bigs are on the floor. It's got to be more unpredictable than that. It's got to be faster than that. They are running their half-court offense at a furious, frenetic pace. We'll get into that a little bit more. And at the center of it all, coming a very quiet 7th, I believe, in Tim Bontem's straw poll today of the MVP, Donovan Mitchell, 28 points, 6.5 assists. That's a career high. 5.5 rebounds. That's a career high. And I think playing the best defense of his career, the Cavs are plus 11 per 100 possessions with Donovan Mitchell on the floor and minus 2.5 without him. He carried the team during the absences of Garland and Mobley. Look, we can sit here and have a semantic debate about what the MVP conversation is. He does not belong above Giannis, Shea, and Jokic in the MVP conversation in whatever order you want to put those guys. And then you have Luka, another guy, Kawhi, blah, blah. We can talk all about that. What he does belong in, though, is he deserves to get his Jalen Brunson moment, where everybody on national TV spends a segment of their NBA show talking about, where's Jalen Brunson in the MVP conversation? Yes. Where is he? Donovan Mitchell has been, I think, per minute, equally good, if not a hair better than Jalen Brunson, but Jalen Brunson has a big minutes advantage over him. Just an unbelievable season. And this is the magic of basketball, man. 82 games is too many games, is too long, but the twists and the turns, this team is interesting. How are they feeling about the reintegration of Garland and Mobley and their ability to sort of stick with what worked without them? And how are Mobley and Garland specifically? What are they saying about that?
I think you hit on it, Zach. I think the most important thing for the Cavs is being able to diversify their attack, especially on the offensive end of the floor, because they were too predictable last year in the playoffs against the Knicks. And part of that had to do with the personnel that they had. And now, because they went through this long stretch without Evan and Darius, and they were forced to play a different style and use different groupings and lineups and combinations, they have found different things that work with different groups that they put out there. So if they want to play 2 bigs, they can do it, right? If they want to play 4 shooters and stagger Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, they can do that. If they want more movement-based stuff on the offensive end of the floor, they can pair Max Strus and Sam Merrill together at the same time. That creates a lot of havoc for an opposing defense. If they want to go pick and roll stuff, they can do that too, because Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, both elite pick and roll players, Jared Allen, an elite pick and roll big. So they can play a bunch of different styles while at the same time leaning on their defense, which has been great during this last stretch. So they're feeling really good about the things that they have found, the ways that they can attack teams on the offensive end, the style that they're playing defensively, the competitiveness that they're playing with on a nightly basis. And you see glimmers of Darius Garland finding himself again and Evan Mobley finding himself again. Look, Zach, over the last month or so, since Evan Mobley came back, he has been the 5th most efficient offensive player in the entire NBA, right there in the category with Jimmy Butler, Steph Curry, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and some of the elite players. Evan is finding a way to blend into the fabric of this team, not force it too much. He's extending his game more out to the perimeter. He's shooting the ball with more confidence. There's more arc on his shots. And then even in the loss against Philadelphia, Darius Garland had a really, really important moment. It was in the third quarter. The Cavs went on a 12-2 run, and Darius was responsible for all 12 of those points. And he came back to the bench, and he was really, really excited. He was amped, and you could tell, like, that wasn't the moment where he felt like, hey, I'm back, because he's not there yet. I think it's going to take through the All-Star break for him to feel like he's quote unquote back in the rhythm that he was before he fractured his jaw. But there were signs of him starting to see the game quicker and not being a half step slow and reading what the defense was doing and seeing how he could fit within this new dynamic offensively.
Yeah, they look, I mean, look, they lost last night. You're going to lose games. It's going to happen. They were bound to lose another game. They've looked like outstanding. Obviously, the record speaks for itself, but they've had games where they just flat out outclassed teams. Some good, some bad, just out, like you're up 20 in the second quarter, outclassed. A couple of things you mentioned. Mobley is 7 of 12 on threes in his last 6 games.
Yep.
It's not throw a party. It's not cause for celebration. It's just interesting. Something I'm looking at. Number 2, Jared Allen has never played with this kind of confidence on offense before.
Nope.
If he is having these takes to the basket 3 or 4 times a game where he will catch it at the foul line and he needs a dribble and he can do it lefty dribble, lefty finish, righty dribble, lefty, whatever. And he's like gliding. It looks smooth. He had a little lefty hook last night that I would not describe as smooth, but it was effective. He's just never been, he's more than just a dunker right now. And that's important for them. And Sam Merrill, look, he's going to fall to the fringes of the rotation. It's already happening. Just a game ops idea for the Cavs. When he comes in the game, start a countdown on the jump, the Humongatron, which is, by the way, hats off to the Cavs for leaning in all the way to how ridiculous it is that their Jumbotron is so big that they call it the Humongatron. Like, they actually say that word on the broadcast. And they just showed the replay on the Humongatron. The Humongatron, which sounds like a Transformer robot, should have a countdown of how long it takes before Sam Merrill gets up a 3. And if it's less than 30 seconds of game time, everyone should have to take a drink. Everyone of age who has a drink should have to chug a beer like Taylor Swift at the Super Bowl. And by the way, just so zooming out, here's where we are. One of the interesting subplots, obviously, for the rest of the season is the race for seeds 2 and 3 in the Eastern Conference. The Knicks are now 4 games behind in the loss column from Cleveland after getting robbed of a chance at overtime last night in Houston on an absolutely ridiculous call that the referees immediately admitted was ridiculous. Does nothing for the Knicks, but I appreciate your candor. And they're now 2 games up on the Bucks in the loss column in the 2, 3, 4, and 4 up on Philly too. Basketball Reference gives them a 77% shot at finishing with the 2nd seed. Playoffstatus.com, which is a site I like, is a little less optimistic, still 60%. Like, if they stay healthy, their schedule is just okay. We're probably looking at the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. At least the math says we are. That's a big, big deal for Cleveland.
It's a massive deal. It could be the difference between them getting out of the first round of the playoffs and making a deep playoff run, Zach, and losing in the first round. Look, how different would the conversation have been about the Cavs and whether last year was a successful season for them if they got Brooklyn in round 1 as opposed to the Knicks, who are a terrible matchup for them? Completely different. But maybe they don't learn as much, right? Maybe they don't evolve the way that they have. So maybe that was a benefit to them. But if we're looking at it big picture, Zach, coming into this year, I think a lot of people felt like, okay, it's locked in. Top 3 seeds in the Eastern Conference in some order are going to be Boston, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia. So that meant,
and it never works out that way. We always lock these teams
right.
in, and it looks like the right thing to do. And then there's like 9,000 weird things happen. It's like, oh, it's not going to be that way.
Oh, shoot, we should have used an erasable pencil instead of a pen for that one. But then you had the Cavs and you had the Knicks and you had the Hawks and you had Indiana and some of these other teams that were battling for the final locked in 3 playoff spots in the East, but we're also battling to like avoid different teams in the playoffs in a sense. But coming into the year, you felt like, okay, well, Cleveland and New York probably on a collision course to face each other in the first round again at 4-5 again. Not a great matchup for the Cavs. Maybe 50-50, maybe 60-40, depending on how you look at that series. And then if the Cavs were going to advance past New York or whoever it would be in that 4-5 matchup, then you're facing Boston in the second round of the playoffs. Like, what? Now they're looking at a situation where if they stay in the 2 seed, the first round matchup could be, emphasis on could be, because you never know about Miami. They've got Tiger blood, and you never know about Philadelphia if they bring back Embiid in the playoffs and some team has to play them in the first round. That's asking a lot. But they could be faced with a better, more favorable first round matchup that allows them to get out of the first round, which is their primary goal. And then the possibility of avoiding Boston until the conference finals. So, teams aren't looking and saying, hey, we've got to find the easiest road to get to the NBA finals or something along those lines. But the easier path that you have, the better chance you're going to have. And maybe that could be the difference between a long playoff run and a first round exit. So the Cavs being in the 2nd seed in the Eastern Conference, Zach, I think it's critical for them.
Now, assuming the Knicks get healthy soon-ish, and the All-Star break is very well timed for them, for Anunoby's injury and for Randall's injury, the 7th seed, if Cleveland stays 2, the 7th seed is going to be one of 4 teams. Philadelphia, you outlined why that could potentially be scary.
Yeah.
Orlando, I think with apologies to the young and frisky Orlando Magic, they would be the preferred opponent of this group.
Yeah.
Indiana, who's currently 7th. I'm going in standings order. That's no picnic, man. That offense is legit. And although they missed Buddy Hield, and you felt it last night on the other end of that trade, and Siakam has just added every dimension they could have hoped Siakam would add to that team. And you mentioned Miami, which condolences to Jimmy Butler, who's taken a leave of absence to deal with the death in the family. But you just don't want to run into that team in the playoffs anytime, any round, wherever. It's not going to be any kind of picnic for them. But look, I think they've been so good that everyone wants to answer the question of, is this a championship contender or not? Is this a contender right now?
Yeah.
And I guess by their record and their seed, you'd have to say, I guess, sure. What happened in the playoffs last year was problematic and disturbing and has scarred me as a Cleveland Cavaliers evaluator. But I do think it's important to remember, this team is still quite young. They have not won a playoff series together yet, not even close. I mean, and the only game they won, it's wild to say this now, the only game they won against the Knicks, Jetty Osman's defense on Jalen Brunson was a thing that changed the game. Jetty Osman now plays for the San Antonio Spurs, if you don't remember where he is. And I still think those Mobley Allen minutes, although they have minimized them by staggering them so that they sometimes don't ever come back and play at the end of each half together. Sometimes they play that first stint and that's it. And then sometimes they come in and finish the half. I actually was frustrated last night. They took Mobley out late in the game, was that a minutes restriction thing?
It was. That's
what
he's going to be on a minute restriction until after the All-Star break. Yeah.
That's what I had heard from some of their people. So they brought their starting 5 back in the game to close it against Philly. They have not had a crunch time tester with those guys back almost since they came back. And I was like, I'm excited to watch this. And they pulled Mobley for Karis LeVert. And by the way, Karis LeVert has never defended like this in his entire career. He's even better than he was last year. He's blocking shots. He's just fighting over screens. He's been awesome for them as, I guess, their 6th man, whatever you want to call him. And I was interested to see all right, now let's see how this lineup closes the game. And then the minutes restriction, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I still think it looks a little clunky at times with those 2 guys on the floor together offensively. Their offensive rating with those 2 on the floor is 110 points per 100 possessions. That's bad. It's getting better, just like everything else about the team is trending better. And because both of them have advanced by 10, 15% as playmakers, shooters, whatever you want to classify them, the big guys, and because they have more shooting around them with Strus flying around, and Strus hasn't hit enough threes this year, but that doesn't bother me. I think he's been playing exactly as they want him to play. It's trending the right way, but when it can still get a little clunky, and whether it's in the playoffs or in a big nationally televised regular season game, eventually JB Bickerstaff is going to have to make a really hard choice of who's not closing tonight.
Yep.
And how that is received by the players is going to be very telling. And when and how it happens and what leads up to it is going to be very telling, because there's going to be a fourth quarter where those two bigs are on the floor and the offense stalls out because the spacing is clunky and Mobley misses a floater, the interior passing, it gets deflected or whatever. I'm not sure I believe in the offense with those two bigs on the floor quite enough for me to say this team is a ready-made contender now.
And here's the thing about that conundrum, Zach, if you even want to call it a conundrum, because I think there are enough flashes of Evan and Jarrett together being great, especially on the defensive end of the floor. Where
the defense is, I'd like them to be a little better on the defensive glass when they're playing big, but they're fine. Defensively, they're crazy. And all the stuff I'm talking about with their offense, their pace and their unpredictability makes it more viable for them to play together, but still it gets a little clunky. But please go ahead.
And this is why there's an actual decision for JB Bickerstaff, because the roster has improved to the point where there's something else that they could go to where they feel like they gain offensively. You know what I'm saying? If you go back to last year, JB didn't want to split up Evan and Jarrett all that much because what was he going to go to? Was he going to go to Dean Wade in the situation where he was in, where he didn't have any confidence? He couldn't lift his shoulder above his head because he was dealing with an injury. Did he want to take Evan off the floor and split him from Jarrett Allen to go to Lamar Stevens in a small ball lineup? Did he want to do that to get Jetty Osman on the court more? So like the options that he had, they weren't appealing enough where he felt like, hey, I'm going to gain something offensively if I split those two guys up. So he still felt like, hey, I'm losing a little bit offensively. The spacing's a little bit wonky. The court's a little bit more congested. I probably don't have enough shooting, but I'm gaining so much defensively that I'm just going to stick with it. This year, the personnel is different, right? They could go to George Niang in a 4-shooter lineup, and he hasn't hit shots the way that he would like to at this point in time. But you know what he's capable of. You know the kind of threat that he brings to an opposing defense.
It's funny how that works with shooters. Like Strus and Niang haven't done enough of the thing they're supposedly here to do.
Right.
And yet they're playing both of them exactly how they should play.
Yes.
And like, I don't worry at all about the shot because they're such threats that they could be shooting 32, 33% and defenses still treat them like a 5-alarm fire.
Of course. The Cavs did a study this past off season. I don't know that they had to do a study on this, but they were curious on it. Like, what creates more gravity for an offense? Is it shooting percentage or is it shooting volume? And what they determined is that it was shooting volume. So as long as Niang is going to continue to shoot the opportunities that he gets, and the same thing with Max Strus, and the same thing with Dean Wade and Sam Merrill and some of these other guys, like they have enough of a reputation that a team's not going to sit there and say, well, you know what, dude? Like you're shooting 34%, so we're going to sag off of you. Like it's different when those guys shoot 34% compared to Isaac Okoro when he shoots 38% because of the sheer volume and the level of attention and the level of reputation that those guys have built. But the point is, like, they have different options that they can go to expand offensively if they split up Jarrett and Evan. And that's different from last year. So that really does make it an actual decision for JB to have to make. And it will be interesting to see how Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley handle that if it comes down to that. And it may come down to that in a specific matchup in a 7-game series.
Yeah, because we're talking about one of those two guys. It's going to be one of them. And one of them is a former All-Star center who has played, I think, even better in the last 5 weeks than he did when he made the All-Star team. Justifiably, probably feels like, hey, I held down the interior by myself for 6 weeks. And the other guy is kind of the guy who was classified as the most important player in the franchise, and maybe
not kind of
was and maybe still is. By the way, I never sold any of my Evan Mobley stock after last year's playoffs. You can go back and listen to the podcast. I still haven't. Give me all you're down on Evan Mobley. Anyone down on Evan Mobley? Call me. Call my people. I don't have any people. What was I talking about? It's not going to be Garland or Mitchell, despite the fact that their existence on offense is just fine. Like I don't think it'll ever be like Warriors level beautiful game between the two of them, but both of them are, even you watch Donovan, when he doesn't have the ball, he's kind of like sliding around off the ball, skulking around, just little 5-foot, 10-foot relocations to try to, if the defense isn't looking at him, if Darius is doing his little Steve Nash thing under the rim, Donovan will try to find in little pockets of open space. LeVert is doing that more.
Yep.
It's not going to be one of them. It'll be one of the bigs. Can I give you an example from last night of what I mean by pace? And like for fans, if they diehards, if they want to look into what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Second quarter, middle of the second quarter. Both the bigs are in the game. The Cavs call a set play out of a flex action, I think it was out of a timeout. And it starts with Donovan Mitchell setting a cross screen under the rim for Evan Mobley. And you watch Donovan Mitchell set this screen. He sprints into it and hits Evan Mobley's guy. It's not like a fake, just like, let me jog into this thing and kind of like pat you on the back. He nails KJ Martin with a pick. So hard, in fact, that KJ Martin is dislodged and the Sixers have to switch. And Tyrese Maxey has to take Evan Mobley on the block. There's option one right away for the Cavs. Evan Mobley, whose post-up game is getting better and certainly against mismatches, has little Tyrese Maxey on him. Then part two of the play is Donovan Mitchell zooms off of Jared Allen pin down at the foul line. That's the second part of the play. And he flies off the screen, flies off of it, so much so that Jared Allen's guy has to zoom off of Jared Allen and like double Donovan Mitchell on the catch. Donovan Mitchell makes the easy bounce pass to Jared Allen for a layup. It's just like the pace makes that 8 out of 10 times teams are going to run that at 3/4 speed, and it's not going to accomplish very much. The Cavs are running it at 110% speed. And just like even their pick and rolls are not just pick and rolls. Like Mobley will have the ball and Donovan Mitchell will come for a handoff and decide, you know what? No, I'm just going to keep zooming to the other side. And here comes Max Strus crisscrossing with me for a handoff. And like, you just don't know what's coming as easily, and everything is fast. And that's just how they're going to have to play when the two big guys are on the floor. You probably have seen 100 possessions like that. I was just focusing on it last night because I knew you were coming on today, and they were zooming last night. I know they lost, but they're flying.
And to your point, Zach, the only players in the NBA that have made more off-ball cuts per game than Max Strus and Sam Merrill, there's only one player. It's Klay Thompson. So, like, that element to the offense did not exist last year because they didn't have players that did it to that level with that force, with that thrust, with that dynamic ability. And it's really changed the Cavs and the way that they can go offensively. And even though Max Strus is not shooting, and he talked to me the other night, like, I am not making the amount of shots that I think I'm capable of. And early on in my career, I probably would have struggled with confidence, but I've learned that I can make an impact a different kind of way. Even with Strus having such low shooting percentages, they function at a completely different level on the offensive end when he is off the court. He is, by numbers, their second most important player in terms of on-off differential behind just Donovan Mitchell. So even though he's not making those shots, it hasn't changed the kind of impact that he has had and his ability to raise the game of everybody around him and his ability to make things easier on his teammates as well, which is ultimately what he was brought here to do.
I mentioned Mitchell and Garland before. Not that I ever think this was going to be an issue, really, in terms like ruining their team level issue, because Darius Garland is a pretty selfless player by nature. But sometimes injuries and blips in the schedule, whatever, have a way of kind of clarifying things organically. And in Darius Garland's absence, Donovan Mitchell ascended to such a level that I just don't think there can be any argument that the offense really belongs to him, and Darius Garland is going to have to fit in as the number 2 perimeter guy, and he'll get to run the offense with Donovan Mitchell. It reminds me, like 5 seasons ago, Tatum had just a month where he broke out, where he, like, in the middle of the season, it was like the first third of the season, ratcheted up to like, oh, he's a top 10 player now. And that just settled the Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum thing forever. Like, it was going to be Jason Tatum's team and Jaylen Brown's going to have to fit in. I think that is settled in Cleveland too. And I think Darius has the kind of game where even if that could have been an issue, it can't be anymore. And Okoro, I just want to shout out Okoro. That dude is guarding everybody, and they'll put him on point guards, wings. In some of these series, he's going to have to be the answer to who guards the best wing on the other team. Sometimes it's going to be Mobley, as we've talked about. You invert the matchup so Mobley guards like a Jason Tatum or a Jaylen Brown. But one thing we've learned from that playoff series and going forward is you just can't play a Okoro together with the two big guys. It's a total non-starter, despite the fact that he's shooting it better. But I guess to end, what I would say is the contender question is like good for TV. It's like a fun question. It's a yes or no question, and that's what people love. It's hard to say this about a team that went 17-2 in its last 19 games. I still think a totally successful outcome for this team is win a first round series. And if you lose in the second round to Milwaukee, a healthy Philadelphia, New York, whatever the seeding ends up being, Boston, if you fall into the 4 or 5, and it's a good competitive series, like that's a step to where you want to get to. And I think given where they started the season and given that I still need to see those two bigs together in a playoff setting offensively, I think that would be a totally successful season. They probably would disagree at this point. I bet internally they think, yeah, that'd be great. It would at least we wouldn't have scrutiny if that was our season, but we think we can do something more. But I don't know. What do you think? Is that if they advance past that, is that too faint praise for them or whatever?
I do think there are some inside the organization that came into this season, Zach, and saying, all right, if we get out of the first round, that makes it a successful season. But the way that this has all come together and the fact that as the season progresses, they can get even better and better because their projected starting five has only played a grand total of 225 total minutes together. And we're past the 50-game mark. So there's a belief that with more time together, more reps, more familiarity, they can grow organically with that group, right? Evan Mobley's going to get more of an understanding of how he fits now that he's back and going to be off a minute restriction when they come back from the All-Star break. Darius Garland's not going to have a minute restriction either. And for all the questions about Darius and Donovan together and how it looks from time to time, like with them both on the court in 485 total minutes, they've got a 9.5 net rating, which as a pairing is better than Fox and Sabonis. It's better than Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. It's better than Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. It's right in the same realm as Damian Lillard and Giannis. It's in the same realm as Jamal Murray and Jokic. So those guys have been successful together, and I think they're going to continue to get better and better as the season goes on. So I guess what I'm saying is based on the way that they've played and based on the ceiling that they still believe that they have, I think expectations have shifted. And I think it's okay that they have. Like a lot of the weaknesses that showed up in that first round playoff series against the Knicks were addressed. They've got more shooting. They're taking more threes. They learned a lot in terms of how to navigate those certain situations of playoff level physicality and playoff level intensity. They've handled those environments where they're in tight games in the fourth quarter a little bit better. They're 33-3 this year, Zach, when taking a lead into the fourth quarter. So they're finishing, they're closing, they're understanding those kinds of things. And their bench, which was a huge weak point last year, they had the 28th scoring bench in the entire NBA a year ago. This year, they're top half of the league. So a lot of the issues that popped up in that series against the Knicks, they feel like they remedied based on their personnel and they remedied based on the styles that they can play at both ends of the floor. And I think there are reasons to believe that, are they Boston? No, Boston's on a completely different level. But with the situation with Embiid and everything that's gone on in Milwaukee this year and the questions about the Bucks, why can't we make a deep run in the playoffs? That's the way that the Cavs are thinking. I mean, over the last 20 games, and you can talk about the schedule, but over the last 20 games, they have trailed by less than 250 total minutes. That's an insane level of dominance for a long stretch of time. Everything about their resume points to them being a legitimate contender.
They're just outclassing a lot of teams. And I don't disagree. I guess here's what I'm saying. Let's say they get by the first round.
Yep.
In a second round series, I'm not picking them over Boston, assuming everyone's healthy. I got to see how the Bucks look over the next 25 games. But I still just would default to they have Giannis and Dame and some championship pedigree. The Knicks, again, fully healthy based on what they did to the Cavs last year. If they're rolling in the last 20 games and Anunoby looks healthy, Randall looks healthy, I think I'd probably have the Cavs as slight underdogs in that series. Philly's a total wild card because I'm just not sure it's realistic to expect we see like fully optimized Philadelphia with Embiid. If we do, that's a scary matchup for Cleveland too. And that's okay. Like that, like you've got to be okay with 2-2 in the second round against the Bucks. We lose a nail biter at home in game 5 and they close it out in game 6. Not a failure. Not a failure. Right. Especially not when you have Dean Wade for all your accounting needs. Dean Wade for all your accounting needs. Dean Wade. Dean Wade. Chris Fedor. Any parting thoughts on the Cleveland Cavaliers?
I think the only thing that I would add, Zach, and you mentioned Jarrett Allen, like there was a big shift for him, and you were talking about his level of engagement, his level of involvement. You know, early on in the season, he came into this year saying, I want to be more involved offensively. I've worked on my mid-range game. I've worked on my passing. I feel like
he's made some jumpers in recent
50%,
games.
50% on mid-range jump shots. That's good enough for somebody like him who finishes with the efficiency that he does around the rim. And at the beginning of the year, like it's almost as if the Cavs didn't put their confidence behind him, and it was more Evan Mobley. Early on, Jarrett Allen was 6th on the team in total touches per game. 6th. He was getting as many touches per night as George Niang. Since, you know, Evan Mobley and Darius Garland went down during that stretch, Jarrett became number 3rd in the offensive hierarchy, and he's not somebody who's going to complain about touches or complain about minutes or anything along those lines. He doesn't ruffle feathers. He's a low-maintenance guy. He's a simple man. But you see a different level of commitment from him. You see a different level of joy from him. And like them giving him the confidence to expand his offensive game during that stretch without Darius and Evan, I think it created this different guy that we're seeing right now. And it's going to be really important, I think, for the Cavs to continue to tap into that, because he is like Donovan's their best player. He's probably their most important player for the future. Evan Mobley is probably their most important player. I could probably take the probably away from that one. But like the most indispensable player that they have is Jarrett Allen. So seeing him with this level of involvement on the offensive end and feeling like he's more of a part of it, I think that has unleashed a different guy who has been worthy of all-star consideration.
Well, and he was the one to wrap up that he was the one that expressed most openly and most nakedly that the playoffs felt different to the Cavs in a way that they did not expect last year. The pressure, the intensity, and it will be interesting to see how they respond to it this year. If they use that as fuel, like, all right, we've been here, we failed. Guess what? We survived. Everything's okay. Let's go and get it. Let's go and get it. Or if they wobble a little bit, I actually expect it's going to be the latter. Like we failed, we were embarrassed, and guess what? We recovered and we're back. It's going to be fun. This is a really good team and a really fun team to watch too. Chris Fedor, Cleveland.com. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy All-Star.
You got it, man. You do the same.